Welcome to Real Estate Investing Abundance, the show for busy, fulfilled professionals like you to learn how to develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. Now, here is your host, Dr. Alan Lomax.
Hello, enlightened investors. Welcome back to the show. As always, delighted to be with you today. And today we're going to take a look at the secret of finding financial freedom by 40 through real estate investing. Jesse Stump is an avid real estate investor, and he is the founder of Cville Properties, a property management company in Catonsville, Maryland. His diverse residential, commercial, and multifamily portfolio allowed him to reach his financial freedom number in 2022, just before turning 40 years old. So Jess, take us into the show and share a memorable experience that may have helped you to be who you are today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to it. So, memorable experience in my formative years that shaped me. I was a big track and cross-country runner from really as far back as I can remember. My dad ran in high school, college, and I learned a whole lot about discipline and just the time and pressure aspect of dedicating yourself to a long-term goal and just watching slow results build up over time. And I think that discipline has served me well from an investing standpoint. And yeah, it just really has kind of made up the way I've approached problems and goals throughout my life.
Yeah, sports are a good thing to teach those kinds of responsibilities. Music's another way that we can teach our children to do those kinds of things, because they all are skills built over time, and a lot of what we have to do in either sports or in music is tedious and not very much fun. And the results don't come instantaneously. And that has certainly been the way my real estate experiences have been as well. So tell us, Jess, how did you get started in real estate?
So in 2013, my wife and I were living in our current town, but in a smaller home. We had just had our first child, and like a lot of other families at that age point, you start looking at school districts, getting into a bigger house. My wife was now pregnant with our second child. And so we started looking for properties on the other side of town that were in the school district that we were looking for. And we're looking and ultimately found this kind of bizarre house that had essentially, if you can envision it, a 2006 two-bedroom apartment that was bolted on top of this 1950s rancher. And it was a strange property. And so it sat on the market for almost a year. And one day we loved the location, it was in the right school district. And one day the gears just started turning, and it was like, this place is bizarre, but if we could rent that apartment out, we could actually drastically reduce our living expenses and move to this larger home in this ideal area with some compromises, right? We're going to have a tenant above us, but we've been there for 10 years, and it was probably the best financial decision that we ever made, because it, one, opened our eyes to real estate. We held on to our first primary residence as a rental, and then just opened our eyes to the creative ways you can leverage real estate to, improve your quality of life, increase and generate cash flow. So that was really the beginning. And, from there, we started to just invest first in single family homes, single family rentals. And after a few years, started to get into some commercial and multi-family. And primarily, the majority of our portfolio now is made up of commercial multi-unit in the town where we live.
Well, that's not dissimilar to the way that I found my way into real estate. I purchased a single family home and divided it into actually 3 units. And it just felt so wonderful not to have a mortgage payment. And, I divided it up the way I wanted to. So I had largest portion of the house. And yeah, I had neighbors living right next to me, but they were all under my control, essentially. Sure. So it was a wonderful experience. Well, what are some lessons that you learned from those first deals that set you up to move forward?
After we bought our current home, it took us a good 2 plus 3 years to save enough money to buy our first true investment property, which was a single family home. Needed maybe $20,000 worth of work, and that went well. We took the normal lumps of trying to find our first tenants and not really knowing exactly how to go about that. But I think the biggest thing that we learned early on was after we got that one up and say we were cash flowing, $600 a month, which was good. It just was like, this is not scalable. This is going to take us forever if we stick with this approach. So that really, after we did one or two of those, it really started to open our eyes up to some different opportunities in multi-unit. As I started looking into numbers for some properties that were available, it just started to make a lot more sense for us to go in the multi-unit route from an increased cash flow standpoint. Every time you bring on a new property, it's another lease, it's another tenant, it's more risk, it's more roofs, more appliances, right? And so if you can develop more of a multi-unit portfolio, if you're smart in how you do it, and things change drastically as you go that route with regards to financing and the types of deals and contract, all of it changes. But we have found that to just be much more practical for our lifestyle and what our goals are. So that was probably the biggest thing we learned early on, is one, learning the ropes through doing it, with the single family route. And I highly recommend that to anybody starting out. But for us, it just got to a point where we wanted to increase the scalability of it and maybe speed up the process a bit. And so that's what pushed us more in the multi-unit and multi-unit commercial route.
Give us some detail in terms of that transition. It sounds like it's very easy to do from the way you just talked about it, but I'm sure there were major challenges along the way. And even though there's a lot to be learned from going into a single family deal and doing that as an actual investment property and renting that up and managing it and taking care of it. Wonderful lessons learned there. But you did that all on your own, with your own money, with your own time. And if you're going to scale into commercial real estate, there's a lot of other things you're going to have to learn. So what are some of those things that you had to learn along the way?
Yeah. So as far as that transition, and I totally hear you. I mean, initially that was the furthest thing from our radar. It's just, you kind of have to learn as you go. We found a property that had a residential apartment on the second floor and a commercial, well-established commercial cleaning company on the first floor. They'd been around a long time. They were kind of a mainstay in the area. So we felt good about that as a tenant. And then this second floor apartment needed renovation, had existing tenants, but we saw a clear value add there. And so for us, since we knew the apartment piece that we could handle that, and as we ran the numbers, it's like, as long as we have a tenant in this apartment, we're breaking even. And so that was kind of that, kick to say, hey, we can take this on. It's going to be a learning experience. And so, yeah, that really was what kind of moved us in that direction. The commercial financing was a big eye opener, the differences, especially the unique nature of that property. I had a really hard time finding someone to lend on it. And, after probably contacting 20 local, and regional type banks, I finally found a good partnership with a local lender. And yeah, that was our first foray into it. And it's just been a learning experience. I think the next property from there was maybe another, like a duplex, but then we fully, did a multi-unit commercial with no residential piece as our next deal, something that popped up. And so certainly having the residential commercial mixed use piece gave us more of a comfort level. And so, yeah, that was how it happened for us.
Well, Jess, you had mentioned, well, first of all, the challenges in finding a lender for a unique property. What were the challenges? I don't know what you say. You went through some 30 banks before you found one who would lend. What was their opposition to this particular property?
Commercial lending is much more relationship based, as I've found. The bank, they're underwriting the performance of the property more so than, your pay stubs. And they want to have a confidence level that you're going to be able to make this property perform the way that we're projecting, right? And the numbers, it stood on its own as a good price point at its current rent roll and expenses. But the challenge is when you're starting out is that a bank has to have a comfort level that yeah, that you're going to be a good bet, that you're really going to be able to get this property stabilized and be able to operate it the way that you're telling them you will on the pro forma you provide them. And so initially, when I'm calling banks cold, it was not a huge dollar value, which also is less attractive to banks. They're spending the same amount of time to underwrite a $400,000 loan as they are a $2 million loan. And so the price point, I think, was not as attractive for them. And then I'm just some young guy off the street who has no prior performance in the commercial investing realm. And so really on the commercial side of things, it's been just developing relationships and generating a proven track record for being able to deliver on the promises you're making with bringing these properties, renovating them, bringing them up to market rents, and operating them well.
Enlightened investors, if you haven't done so already, be sure and click that like button and also click that share so others can take advantage of the content. And finally, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single one of our upcoming episodes. Besides just the relationships of that, the commercial loans are structured different than residential loans. Can you take us through the major differences?
Yeah, so most residential loans that folks are accustomed to are typically 30-year fixed rate loans. They have very strict guidelines that are driven by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and therefore there's certain criteria. It's a very similar experience as you go from lender to lender if you're looking for a 30-year fixed loan. Commercial notes can be structured many different ways. They typically will have 5 to 10-year balloons, meaning you've got a fixed rate and a set amortization period, but that note gets called in either 5 or 10 years. And so it's important that you have a very high degree of comfort that you're going to do the necessary value add, that property is going to be performed at a place that you're not going to be in a situation 5 years, 10 years down the road where you're going to have a hard time refinancing, because that note will be called. Another big difference on the commercial side is if you're buying a residential home, it is worth what your 2 or 3 neighbors up the street property sold for within the past 6 months. Commercial property is solely valued based on a multiple of the net operating income. And so your ability to make that property perform at a certain level is what's driving the value. And so you're providing the bank with a pro forma saying, hey, when we're stabilized, we'll be generating this much in rent revenue. These are our expenses, and this is how the property will be performing. That property is valued based on that. And so, yeah, the goal is to have a very, very high comfort level that property is going to be performing, and that it'll ultimately be valued and increase in value based on the additional NOI you're able to generate.
Jess, you had told us about a couple of unique properties. The first one you purchased, the home that you're living in now, was quite unique. And your first commercial endeavor was not totally atypical, but somewhat atypical in the fact that it was a mix of commercial and residential. So what are some of the other properties that you've been involved in? What were the uniquenesses about those properties, and how have you come to find creative forms of streams of income from these different properties?
So I think there's a property I like to point out that we have, because I think it epitomizes the way that we view real estate. We typically try to look for value in places that maybe other investors overlook. We purchased a property in 2020. It was right, as COVID was going on, and it was a really underutilized property. It had 1 or 2 long-term stable tenants that were already unique. It was a ice cream shop that had been there 30 years. There was a yoga studio that had been there 8 years, but then it had some vacancy. It had it's like a half-acre lot in a very, dense, like in our hometown, it's a densely populated area. So half-acre lots don't just, especially commercially, don't just pop up. It also had 5 40-foot long shipping containers on it. So just was kind of a unique property. And so with COVID going on, we knew that outdoor dining was going to be in demand for the foreseeable future. And so long story short, we partnered with a local food truck. He's a well-established, barbecue truck that's been in our area for a long time. And we ultimately talked with him about setting up on the property. We created just some great outdoor seating, outdoor kind of dining venue with some pavilions at the back half of the property that was underutilized. We ended up creating what's called a commissary kitchen. It's a shared use kitchen that he can operate out of with his food truck. But then there's, you've heard about ghost kitchens and the like. There's food trucks that need kitchens to have their licenses. And so this property ended up with self-storage component with the containers. We still rent those out. It's got food truck slots that we're able to rent out. It's got shared commercial kitchen space, yoga studio, long-standing ice cream shop. It's pretty much got just about everything. And the part that we have loved about it the most has been awesome for the community. It's just been a great place for, especially during COVID, for families to be able to get out. The ice cream place already had a walk-up window, so being able to grab ice cream and barbecue and have nice outdoor seating, it just was an awesome addition to the community. And for us, that's the real win-win. When you can find an underutilized property, do value add to it to not only just increase rents and cash flow for us, but something that really invests back into the community and makes this town that we love a more enjoyable place to live.
Well, kind of take us through this, Jess. You came across this property, I guess, because you were just out looking for opportunities, I suppose. Is that how you just found it, or how did it come to you?
I actually got a call from someone that I had tried to buy a property from previously. And, as you continue to build relationships in this industry, there's not a lot of people who are out looking for commercial properties like this. So it's a relatively small network of folks. And so I got a call and said, hey, this guy is potentially interested in selling this property. And so I reached out to him from there.
And so you come across this property, and it has two tenants who've been there for some time, a vacant lot, and these trucking facilities there. How did you work through this process of conceptualizing that this could be a viable opportunity? I mean, most people would just look at that and look at all of the risk and the liability. And because there's a lot of risk there in taking on any kind of endeavor, but particularly with this particular endeavor, there was not only COVID was happening, but I mean, the ice cream place is probably going to be okay. They have a walk-up window. The yoga studio was probably facing challenges in terms of even staying open through that COVID period. And then there's this whole vacant lot out there with no obvious usage to it. So how did you work through that process, and how did you conceptualize a workable concept?
Yeah, I mean, anytime I get presented with an opportunity, I use the phrase like it remains interesting to me until it's not. So I'm doing due diligence, working through numbers, continuing to look at different angles, and we'll pursue that until, either I have a high comfort level that this thing could be successful, or I've done everything and just say, there's no good way I can make this work. And so there was a number of different things originally that I liked about the property. I saw some of the opportunities just because that's kind of how my mind has shifted as I started to look into the commercial route. I could see some of the positive attributes of this property and know that there was potential there. I liked the long-term nature of the existing tenants. They had long-term leases. They've been, fixtures for a number of years. And just that rent roll alone, I felt was relatively stable. And as I started to look at it and see other opportunities that made it interesting, I reached out to the owner, and because of some of these challenges and the nature of what was going on with COVID, I talked with the owner about seller financing. And so that was a way to make the deal work when otherwise I could have had a hard time selling, even though we had and built a good relationship with a commercial lender. Due to the nature of where we were at, everybody was doing PPP loans at the time. And the last thing people were looking to do was lend on, oddball commercial real estate. But I was able to work it out and find a win-win with the owner who was looking to retire. And so we treated it as a partnership. And so he held the note on the property, and, based on what he knew of me and other properties that we owned in the area, and he could see that we've, had the ability to do it. He trusted us. And so, that was really how it unfolded.
So you moved from just strictly investing in properties yourself into developing a property management company. Take us through the steps of going from investor to property manager.
As you can tell by now, we have a very diverse portfolio of properties, very different types of tenants, different types of leases, right? We're dealing with self-storage, dealing with food truck slots, commercial kitchen shared spaces. A number of years ago, it became clear to me that from a scalability perspective, right? That's what we talked about when we jumped from residential. I can't just keep taking on these properties and bootstrapping it and running around and picking up rent checks and doing leases and having things all over the place. So we made an investment a number of years ago to just say, hey, we're going to build this thing like a business, not treat it like a hobby. It's gotten too time consuming. It's gotten too real. And so just started invested in basically the best platforms out there for managing leases, electronic payments, and just tried to build it as a business, and as opposed to keeping myself as the center cog in every decision and every conversation with tenants, started to allow some of these systems and processes to help not only reduce the time burden on me, but to give a better experience to the tenants, who we're renting from. Electronic payments, electronic leasing is a game changer for them, just as it is for us. And so as we started to build out that platform and manage all of our properties with it, it just made sense to start offering that as a third, to third-party property owners, because it was such a game changer for us in the way that it took kind of unwieldy investments that, this portfolio we had developed and made it very manageable and made it perform even better. And there's a lot of property owners who inherit properties, in trusts and the like, and who love the idea of owning an asset, but are just not in it for the property management. And so we felt like that was a good underserved market in our area. And so it just made sense. And so a number of years ago, we created Cville Properties, started offering that to third parties. I have a partner who also owns a number of properties. And so we manage our own properties with the same systems, tools, processes that we manage third-party properties with. And that's how we can guarantee a high level of service and just excellence in what we do, because our properties are right there with it. So that was kind of how it started, and it has really continued growing, and third-party properties are taking on a bigger and bigger component of properties under management. And it's been a fun thing to be a part of.
Just tell us how we can find you, how we can get in touch with you, and how we can take advantage of what you have to offer.
Yeah. So if you're interested in property management or investing in Catonsville or just the Maryland Mid-Atlantic or, Mid-Maryland area, we're always happy to talk. You can find us, cvilleprops.com is our website, or Cville Properties LLC on Facebook. Feel free to reach out. We love talking about this stuff. And even if it's just to take a look at a deal or ideas for areas to invest in our market, we're happy to talk.
Well, Jess, it's been wonderful having you with us today. Very informative and pleasurable conversation. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Enlightened investors, don't go yet. I have just a couple of quick requests. You know the drill. Like, share, and subscribe. But we also need your help to build our audience, so please go to your favorite podcast app and leave us a 5-star rating and review. I'll be most grateful. Until next time, prosper and live abundantly.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Estate Investing Abundance, brought to you by Steve Talker Capital, a company working for passionate professionals like you to develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steve Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the human treatment of horses worldwide. Steve Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures, great and small, flourish abundantly. For resources to develop your financial independence, connect with us at stevetalker.com.